Nobody else has.
Okay.
But I do know, little birdie told me that you were particularly close to George Harrison, so
Yes.
you might know this answer. Is it true that George Harrison came over to America and remixed the White Album because he didn't like the EQ?
The answer is yes and no. He came over. We were working on the Jackie Lomax project, and George was very frustrated with the sound on the album, and so he remastered it. So this was not remixing each of the songs, but actually remastering the EQ on the overall album. And I was with him when he did it, yes.
You were with him?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know I've never heard anyone give an answer to that?
Yeah. You know, and I've heard different versions of this, but I read these things, but I was there, you know. And
what was that like?
Well, I never would talk about being with the Beatles for 20 years. It was like, it was such a special place, and I felt very privileged, and they were very open with those of us that were in one of the inner circles. There were more than one inner circle, but we all felt so privileged that we had been invited in, and they treated us so good. And it's not like everybody said, well, okay, let's make a pact. We won't talk about it.
Right.
We won't write about it. We just, for some reason, we all just decided not to. Just out of respect for the privilege and how good they were to us. And then what's really interesting is like 40 years later, we're all writing about it. And it's very curious to think about that. And so we've talked with each other, a lot of us, and I think time has passed, that there's no betrayals now in our stories, because you know it's all past, and all our remembrances now are much softer and much more mature. And
Isn't
we
it
see
sad that, like today, you know, Paul and John, all that would have been behind them. They may have gotten back together.
Oh, there's no question about it. No question. You know, their relationship was so deep, and so I'll give you an example. A real quick example is I was with Paul, and we were in Beverly Hills, and I had a private bungalow for him in the back of the Beverly Hills Hotel, and we had extra time, and so Paul's sitting there, and he's working on songs for the White Album. And so I'm sitting here with him. He said, well, what do you think about this? And I said, well, why don't you try this? And da-da-da. And we were working on Oobla-Dee, Oobla-Da, Back to the USSR, and Blackbird. So I'm driving over Mulholland Drive that night, and I went, wait a minute, was I just songwriting with Paul McCartney, you know? So the record comes out, and it says Lennon-McCartney. Now, I didn't expect it to say McCartney-Mansfield, but, you know, I knew John wasn't there.
Right.
And that's why, and so I asked Paul, I said, well, you know, why isn't that just McCartney? Because John wasn't there. And he said, John and I are such a part of each other, and we are so in sync and in tune with each other, that, and we have written together so much, when I'm writing something, I can almost hear John saying, no, let's do this instead. So he said, in essence, we are writing together. So that's amazing. a pretty close relationship that those two had. You know.
Very tight.
Yeah.
Now you said you were there. Were you there when Paul cut the reggae version of Obladi Oblada?
No.
Okay, that's my favorite version of that. I have about 20 of them.
Oh my gosh.
So that's my.
Wow.
I have every outtake of that one,
Okay.
and I like that one a lot. Now.
In the offices, and we had planned footage, live footage for the film Let It Be. And we kept not getting it done, is what kept happening. And they hadn't played together live in years anyway, so we'd set up different ideas, and it always fell through, and all of a sudden we're basically out of time, so somebody said, we're going up on the roof. And I'd come in from California, and it was January, late January, and freezing cold. We're going up on top of a 6-story building in town, London, and all I have is like California clothes, because I never worried. I'd get up, you know, I'd walk off the plane, get straight into a limo would take me to the hotel, just straight into the hotel, and then limo would take me over to the office. So I was really outside, so I didn't worry that much about clothing. And so I thought, if I'm going to be on this roof, I'm going to freeze my buns off, you know. So I run down the street and grab the first thing I can find, and it's a white top coat. And I get up on the roof, and what I didn't realize, it was actually a raincoat, not a top coat, and it was rubberized, so it just froze. And so it didn't really keep me warm, but everybody up there is wearing black that day. So in the film,
really
the picture,
stand out.
You know, it's easy to spot me, even if it's fleeting, you know, I'm there. So that part worked out good. And then after a while, I mean, you could have hosed me down with ice water, and I wouldn't have even noticed it, because it was just so incredible that day, you know.
Was Phil Spector there at
No,
that time? Was
no,
he around?
no.
Did you meet him in?
I knew Phil in L.A., but I never saw him over there.
Okay. I won't go into the ugliness of what's going on with him, other than it's very sad. He's a musical genius and a very sick person, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Let's get into your book. How do you go from being the head of Capitol, being with Waylon and you were in country music, and Waylon and Jesse are old friends of mine. Miriam.
Yes, Miriam.
And you've done all these things. And were you evolving spiritually? For instance, in the 60s when the Beatles went to India and with the Maharishi and were into studying transcendental meditation, was that a beginning point for you for spirituality? Or what started leading you in the direction, of spirituality, and ultimately you deciding that Christianity was the answer for you?
What happened is my life fell apart, and like all of us, or not all of us, but most of us do, the decadence and the bad choices and the drugs and everything else. And when I started hitting bottom, George had planted seeds in me a few years before, and it was a private conversation we had in the kitchen in a house that I'd gotten for him up in the Hollywood Hills. And
if I may just interrupt, was that the house where he passed?
No.
Right.
This was just a rental, but it was a big place with a pool. So he had planted the seeds, and so when I really needed some spiritual help, that was the reason I went into the whole guru thing, and I spent 10 years doing that.
As a Hindu?
No, as a...
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Do you have everything you need in here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I think so, yeah.
I was asking because George was Hindu.
Yeah, he was Hindu, but I was. I had a Indian guru, and things were pretty much mixed together, in that days. But it was the chanting and the meditating and the astral projecting and all the different kinds of things. And I was a teacher, and I was very advanced in my practices.
A TM teacher?
No, not a TM teacher, just a meditation. I was the follower of a guru named Guru Rajananda, who was the founder of the International Foundation of Spiritual Unfoldment, which expressed itself as the American Meditation Society, the British Meditation Society, the Scandinavian Meditation. He was one of the major gurus at the time. And I was like his favorite chela, and I did all his teachings and things like that. But my life just really fell apart then. And so I was in LA, and I'd lost everything, and my marriage had broken up, and my kids were gone. And so I thought, I'm going to just go back to Nashville, where I'd had so much success with Waylon, Willie, and the boys. And I thought, I'll just go back there and just go crazy. I'll just get my old buddies together. And I called Tom Paul, and he said, yeah, you can land here in the studio. And I called David Frizzell at the time, who I'd been producing. And he said, yeah, you can stay at my house out here in the lake. So I came out here, and I was just going to get crazier and wilder and everything. And I met a young lady right away, and we fell in love immediately. Oh. And she was a very devout Christian, and here I was, a stoner, and I had a guru, and I was broke, and I had a bad rep, Anyway, so we met, but we fell in love. And so we had about a 3-month battle, and she eventually brought me to the Lord. And
did Miriam? I always call Jessie Miriam because I'm Jewish, and she loves for me to use her Jewish name when I talk with her. Did Jessie Coulter, whose real name is Miriam?
We titled that gospel album Miriam.
So you worked with her on that. Did she talk to you at all about?
Jessie would bring it up, but we were all so crazy, and we knew she was, but that didn't mean we had to be. Right. And she would openly pray, and first night after we had I'm Not Lisa as a hit record, we were playing the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. Waylon was headlining, and Commander Cody was on the program, and so we decided to have Jessie go out that night. And Jessie walked out, her first major performance in a major auditorium, and she walked out, and she was all in white, and the lights were on her, and she just glowed, and she stopped at the piano stool and knelt down and prayed. And this was a hardcore stone rock and roll crowd. That's just. And I don't care how people felt about religion, it touched everybody. It was just gorgeous, and I just thought it took a lot of guts too. You know,
She's a very genuine woman.
And then she gets up and dun, 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 you know, it was a wonderful night. But he knew who I was, and we met in the middle of the ballroom at the Sheraton Hotel down on Broadway during a convention, and we met in the middle of the room. I was trying to get across the other side, people, and all of a sudden, Waylon and I are face to face, and it was like crowd opened up like two kids are going to get in a fist fight, and it said, "Hi, I'm Ken." He said, "Yeah, I'm Waylon," and we started talking. And so I was producing an album with Holly. We'd just taken out a Buckland's band and had a Waylon-esque sound. So I said, "Who does your arrangements, Waylon?" He goes, "Huh?" Well, I guess I do. I said, "Well, would you work with me on this album and arrange a couple songs?" And we did Queen and Silver Dollar. We had a hit with that, and then
Didn't you do Amanda with him?
I did Amanda. I did the complete Are You Ready for the Country album.
Right.
I did
the Neil Young cover, Are You Ready for the Country?
Yeah, and then I did on Honky Tonk Heroes, I did the single off that, We Had It All. And then on Ramblin' Man, I did Amanda and It'll Be Her, and on I've Always Been Crazy, I think that's the title of the album.
I've always been crazy, it keeps me from going insane.
Yeah, and I did I Walk the Line on that one. And then I did some other things that aren't in albums with Waylon. 4 albums with Jesse, and 2 albums with Tom Paul. And I did one thing.
So you were with the Outlaws. It was great.
We were inseparable for about 5 years. In fact, in Between Wyoming's a new book. Almost 20% of the book is devoted to the time with Waylon and Jesse and the whole outlaw movement. It's a very
and back when country was country.
Well, and it was real. I mean, we were the real deal. And the people, the crazy thing is, they wanted us to be crazy. And they made us crazier because they wanted to, like, and then I realized later, they didn't have the guts to do it, you know. So,
well, now, did you ever go to Austin, to Willie's studio down there and cut down in luck?
I used to cut down there a lot. I cut several Texas bands down there, and Willie would sing on them. Willie asked me once to start a record label with him, but you know, Willie is as lovable as he is. It's maybe not the, the best idea.
Willie and my ex-husband are very good friends, and I don't know if you know Tex Cobb.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That's my ex-husband.
Oh, okay.
And so they're Willie and Tex are very close.
Well, I tell the story in the new book, Between Wyoming's.
Yeah, my ex-husband may be in your book for all I know.
I don't think he is, no. But we were playing the Houston Astrodome with Willie and Waylon and Ricky Nelson and Tammy Wise. It's a giant lineup. And we're really tired. It was the end of a tour, so we started to go out to the bus to go back to Nashville. We were done. It was the last day. And somebody came with an emergency to John Yearsick and said they're closing down the Texas Opry House because they can't make a payment. And would you and Willie come in and do a benefit concert, and because we could make enough money to keep it open. So Waylon and Willie, they said, well, okay. So now we both, Waylon, Willie, and I get in Waylon's bus, and all of the other guys got on Willie's bus, and we head out for Austin, and it's just like the cavalry coming to save the, it was just like out of a movie, and here's Waylon and I and Willie were playing poker, and so we get over there, and we were up all night, so we slept all day, and then we drove into the parking lot at the Texas Opry House, and it was just crowded with people. It was just crowded with people, the people, and just cheering, and it was just like, it was just the most incredible feeling in the world. And they did a concert like I've never seen. I mean, Willie's 2.5-hour concert was like a pre-warm-up compared to what he did that night. And the place was so packed, it was just the parking lot was full, the place was full. We made more money before this thing even started to save the place. So Waylon and I, we get back to Nashville, and we get a call right away, and they skipped with the money.
Oh my God.
The promoters did. So
oh my God.
Here's these wise cowboys. You just don't fool Waylon and Willie and everybody, and we all got taken for a ride.
Oof, that's not good.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you one more Beatle question.
Okay.
Can you tell me anything about Paul, George, Ringo, or John without violating a personal inner circle confidence that isn't known to the rest of the world?
Well, I think as a group, the thing that was neat is how nice and normal they all were as a group of guys. They were probably the easiest band I ever worked with. We would have meetings, these 4 rock stars, they were on time, they almost like they had their notepads, and we would discuss things very, very, pointedly and have our assignments. And to boil them down, Paul to me was the leader of the group. It seemed like everything we did was started with Paul. Paul's idea, Paul's impetus, and like that. And he was like the most popular kid in high school. That was kind of the Paul McCartney. John was the mysterious one. You never kind of knew what you said, how he was, processing it. And he was very, very curt with me a lot. And he'd send transatlantic cables. We didn't have faxes and stuff in those days. And he would cuss words on girls down the mailroom at Capitol. He'd be like swearing at me, wanting this done and wanting that done. So after he died, I was having lunch in London with Ron Cass, who was the president of Apple, and Tony Bramwell and Neil Aspinall. And we were talking about the guys. I said, I was close with everyone, but for some reason I never felt like I got it with John, and Cass, when he said, "You're crazy. John's the one that liked you best." And it turns out that it was just his nature that he trusted me and he liked me, that there was no baloney in it. He just talked to me straight about what he was feeling. So, if he wanted something done and he was in a hurry and wanted me to get my butt going, he would just talk to me like how you don't soft
you don't say,
everything.
Please, would you mind? It's get me this.
And then I realized he would write me letters and sign albums and send them to me personally and asked me to help him on the Zapple project. And then I kind of started putting the whole relationship. Okay, John, that's John. John was extremely frustrated because later on he really was concerned with world hunger and these kind of causes, and he thought his celebrity could change the world, and he found even as a Beatle he wasn't able to do what he wanted, so he'd get very frustrated. Ringo, easy guy, first time you meet him, you're best friends, and you hang out. And Ringo, spent all those years in LA.
Now that he's sober, he's not nice to be around.
He told me once, he said, now that I'm sober, he said, I play golf, I work out, I eat well, I do everything that I used to hate about other people, But he and I hung out for years and years and years. We went through our different marriages and our downfalls together. And so that was a relationship that carried on forever. And George's did too for quite a while.
Do you still stay in touch with Paul and Ringo?
Ringo and I still share the same attorney. But George was the one I had the real deep spiritual connection, and just one of the.
Well, he was such a spiritual person.
Well, one of the nicest, most gentle men I've ever known in my life, and it was like I was supposed to be taking care of him, but he was more like he took care of me. He one night in London, because he knew how much pressure I was in, I hadn't any sleep because I'm flying back and forth. And we're late night in a meeting up in the Apple building. He came over and he said, "Come on." I said, "What?" He said, "You're going home. You're going to bed." And he took me over to my hotel and versely took my shoes off and laid me up in bed and made sure he said, "I'll cover for you. Don't worry." That kind of, because he saw how tired I was, and he knew the pressure I was under, that I couldn't to say, "Hey gang, I'm tired. I'm out of here."
And by all accounts, he's such a gentle. He was a gentle soul.
I love George.
I know you're in a hurry because you've got to get on stage pretty soon. So very quickly, I want you to say anything you want to say about your book, your new book, because you've had a couple of others out. But your new book comes out June 11th. I'm putting this up not only on my site but on YouTube.
Okay.
So this could possibly get thousands and thousands of hits. So why don't you talk about why people should buy, the Beatles fans, that's how they're going to look at it because you're a Beatle fan.
There are a couple new Beatles stories in the Between Wyomings, but Between Wyomings is because the life I had. I mean, I produced everybody from Don Ho to David Cassidy to Waylon Jennings to, just all kinds of, and worked with all these incredible people over the years, everybody from Judy Garland, so I took the standpoint of, in the old days in the 60s when we were hippies and stuff, we used to go try and find ourselves. So I thought, well, as this old guy, I'm going to go back across my life and find myself, because I've never quite put all the pieces together, because everything was happening so big and so fast that it was like these giant moments. So Connie and my wife and I, we get in a band, we named the band Moses. And we do this metaphorical trip where I return to LA and I tell stories about at Capitol and with the stuff that we did in LA.
The Magical Moses Tour.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And then we're driving along and I'll hear a Glenn Campbell song as we're going across Arizona. I'll tell a story about me and Glenn Campbell. And then Connie falls asleep in the van. I'm going across the Arizona desert and I'm having these conversations with God. And then we pull into Austin and I tell a Waylon and Willie story about things, you know, like the thing I just told you a minute ago. And then we come to Nashville. And when I get to Nashville, I devote about a fourth of the book to all the things that happened with the whole outlaw movement and the Nashville thing. And then we leave there and we go to Connie's home where she was raised. And then we just do a complete trip. And then I decided when we get to Portland that I really got to go back to that roof, that day on the roof. And so I catch a plane and go to London and get up on the lonely old dirty roof, and that's where I really, God and I really have the big conversation.
Oh my gosh.
And that's where I get everything settled together. I get in a plane, fly back, she picks me up at the Portland airport in Moses, and we drive down the coast and live happily ever after. You know? So it's a travelogue, it's a whole bunch of show business stories, and it's also a spiritual journey. And it's interspersed with these conversations with God and show business stories.
And this will be available June 11th. Today. It's available today. Is it available at Amazon.com?
Yeah, it's already on Amazon, and it's in all the bookstores too.
Is there a website that you have that you would like people to go to?
Yeah.
And you don't know it.
I don't know it. Look up Between Wyomings on YouTube, and there's the video. We took a video and
good.
Stuff like that. And
now you said Wyomings or
Between Wyomings is the name.
Between Wyomings is what people need to look up on YouTube.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we done?
We're going to let you go now.
Okay. Pay no attention to that imposter that you saw in those videos a little earlier. It's really me. Right now, on tonight's shoe, we like to look some really Ed Sullivan's been drinking. Some really